So, Scott, I think everybody's waiting for you now.
Great, fantastic. Thanks, Mats. Thank you very much, Sandra and Mats, for inviting this OGC session again this time. I'm terribly sorry that I can't be enjoying jet lag in Gothenburg with you right now, so instead I'll enjoy my jet lag from Steamboat Springs, Colorado, where it is not snowing and the ski season opens tomorrow. So that's going to be quite interesting, but so be it. Uh, Today, we have a really good agenda for the session. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the summary of our activities since the Wuhan meeting, and then present some material that's all linked together between what I carry, Alan, Paul, and Alian. We really today want to talk about practicality. And that is an objective in all the work we do in OGC and our standards is ensure that this work is practical, useful for our community. As you're aware, a lot of the OGC standards are focused very much on implementations. And so we want to ensure that as those standards roll out, they really work as promised. And we'll do that through a few presentations here. One, I'm going to talk to you about the update to our modular specification. This is how we actually ensure that our standards and work are testable. Alan's going to give some thoughts about the experience of rolling out geospatial APIs, a series of standards in ISO TC211 and OGC modern web APIs for conveyance of data. So understanding how do we get this information to our users and our stakeholders. Then Paul Jansson's going to talk about the new best practice published in OGC on UML to JSON. This is super valuable because none of us have given up on our dreams of being brilliant modelers. We still want to do good quality modeling work, but we also recognize that sometimes these encodings are not nearly expecting so much rigor as we'd like to do in our models. So how might we make sure that when we convert to more modern data formats, we're still honoring that rigor that we put into our original modeling? And then finally, Alian's going to talk today about a pilot project underway in OGC using discrete global grid systems, DGGS, for disaster management. So how do the users actually benefit from all the standards work that we've been doing in TC211 and OGC? And I think it'll build really nice. I'll keep abreast of the chat once I'm done presenting, and I think we'll maybe leave questions till the end. I want to make sure that everyone has time, and I do not want to take too much time myself away from my colleagues here. So let me quickly jump into an update of some OGC activities, and then we'll get into the meat. Busy time since May when we all met in Wuhan. Lots of documents published in OGC. We had 4 standards approved, including a API for the discrete global grid systems. And we've also finally passed STAC as an OGC community standard. Those of you not aware, a community standard is a specification of a piece of work developed external to the OGC or ISO communities, but which we find is valuable and we'd like to make part of our standards baseline. The STAC API is based on ISO 19168 Part 1, the OGC API for features, and then there is also a catalog specification that describes the actual content of the catalog, and those are now OGC community standards. We publish lots and lots of engineering reports, primarily from our most recent testbed 20. You'll see lots of these referencing geodata cubes. Another one I want to highlight, because you're going to hear a lot about this from me at the next time we meet, and that's my favorite compound acronym ever, this thing you see at the bottom of the page called GIME. GIME itself stands for Geoint Imagery Media for ISR. And of course, when you unpack that, you get 2 more acronyms out of the deal. So that's Geospatial Intelligence Imagery Media for Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance. It's a mouthful, hence GIME. But GIME's really clever work. If it's got intelligence twice in the acronym, you know it's got to be smart. This is a new imagery and data format package, primarily developed out of the defense community, but one that's been very important in our work in OGC, and in particular has some strong linkages with the work of ISO 19115 and modern access to these data via APIs, cloud storage, et cetera. So you're going to hear a lot about GIME because it's a huge amount of OGC's effort in early 2025 and into 2026. A few other ones, still heavy emphasis on Gimme. If you look at our current um, OGC testbed 21, the majority of the work on that is also involved with this Gimme thing. So you're going to hear Gimme a lot coming up. In fact, if I'm a little old these days, but if I ever had another kid, maybe I'd even name it Gimme. I'm so happy with Gimme work. Couple of technical papers and discussion papers, one dealing with interconnected geospatial ecosystem that is talking about Project Plateau in Japan, uh, 3D data information using City GML, and then a proposed effort on describing material data, like the composition of a building, what's the beam of this roof made out of, et cetera. So some standardization around that database. And we set up a new working group, the Geospatial Observation Needs and Requirements, or GONAR Standards Working Group. One of our senior members commented once that needs and requirements are what we do for a living. So this working group encapsulates everything we believe in OGC, and it should be a really interesting effort to try to describe standardized ways to get those user needs and requirements represented and brought forward into other standards to be realized. Let's see, why did my Oh, there we go. We've had two OGC member meetings since Wuhan. In June, we were in Merida, Mexico. Fantastic meeting, our first one ever in Latin America. Really good attendance. I greatly appreciate the participation from the local community. We got some great perspectives, and there's some really advanced work going on in Mexico right now, particularly with disaster management and use of standards in disaster management scenarios. And then at the very end of October, extending into Halloween itself, we were in Boulder, Colorado, just down the road from my house, so I was sure to carve a pumpkin for our members as part of the celebration. Upcoming events are iDays innovation event. It occurs 9 and 10 December in Frankfurt, or just outside of Frankfurt in Bad Nauheim. The day after that, we'll be having a sprint to work with OGC Rainbow. Those of you not familiar with OGC Rainbow, that is the register for all the OGC definitions, terms, et cetera, and is also where the ISO 19157 Part 3 data quality measures are hosted. And then we've already got scheduled out the remainder of 2026 member meetings, first week of March in Philadelphia in the US, first week of June in Helsinki in Finland, and then in October, it's looking to be the middle of the month in Cape Town, South Africa. Those dates should be solidified very soon. And we're well underway on planning in 27 and 28 months. So you and I can talk about some of the places that we have hosting agreements in hand already. Okay, very quickly, let's just give an update to the OGC APIs before I talk to the mod spec, because everyone asked me about OGC APIs. You can see a lot of these are published now. So the geospatial APIs, like geospatial API features 19168, in ISO already. Maps has now entered the process. Tiles is in the process. There's a discussion of bringing in records and processes, but you can see there's a lot more APIs. All the ones in a big green box we have now published, and those others that are not in a green box are getting really close. I do encourage you on behalf of the really hardworking folks, particularly in Finland and the Netherlands, on the OGC API joins candidate standard. It's out for an extended public comment right now, so do please review that and provide us any feedback. And we're very far along on styles, routes, coverages, and 3D geovolumes, and I expect them all hopefully to publish in 2026 at this rate. We now have a process every time we roll out a new OGC API standard. We also host a webinar to launch that and give people information about what we're doing. So the three most recent ones have dealt with maps, moving features, and records. And you can see really great attendance at maps because this is effectively a replacement for the old web map service, WMS. And so we had great attendance to that webinar. These have been really valuable webinars, and they're very useful for us to understand how users want to adopt these standards. We'll have a lot of guidance coming in 2026 on the migration from W star S, the old SOAP-based standards, to the new RESTful APIs. And Alan's going to show you exactly how that's really happened in reality. We held a code sprint in October in Rotterdam, thanks to GeoNovum and the municipality of Rotterdam for hosting us. Good attendance, really excellent demos. A lot of the material from that code sprint are available already on the OGC GitHub repository for our code sprints, and I can provide a link to for people later. But it just shows how valuable these are in converging our efforts and ensuring that before a standard's ever published, it's very, very testable. And there's diverse. I mean, if you look at how much work occurs in a code sprint, you can see a whole number of tools out there in green, some other forking of activities in blue from GitHub repos, and then sort of in the hatch, the various standards that were tested and how they all interoperate in a code sprint environment. And good contributions to our Git repositories as well. If you haven't attended one of these code sprints, I highly encourage you to. We do one every year that we try to coordinate with our friends in TC211. We've done one on metadata recently. And weirdly enough, the one in 2023 that was joint with ISO TC211 is where all that stuff that I talked about earlier, Gimme, started. That really started with a joint code sprint where some of our ISO TC211 experts on ISO 19115 were able to help the Gimme people overcome the last hurdle they had with their metadata problems. And so super valuable to advance this standard that's heavily used in the defense community now. Finally, with respect to the OGC APIs, we now have a new hands-on course about publishing open data using these APIs. It's really a great course where you actually get to go dig into GitHub and do some publication of data sets. You can evaluate your work with our compliance testing tools. So another benefit of this is you learn how to use the compliance test tools that OGC offers for about 50% of our standards. So far, we've had 21 people enrolled in the class, and we'll continue to offer this and expand to other APIs. Right now, this one is focused on features, but we'll do it with the other APIs. But this coursework is really useful. Those of you who know Joanna Samoas, our developer relations person in OGC, she manages these courses, and I'm happy to get you in touch with her if you have any questions about courses. All right, briefly, before we jump on to my pals here, I want to talk to you about the mod spec, the modular specification. I gave an update on some of the updates we're making to the mod spec in Wuhan, but I want to get into just a little bit more detail in some of the rationale so you see the relevance. I know that some of us in the TC211 are following this quite closely. We had not done an update to this spec, which is foundational to all the OGC work since 2009. And a lot's happened since 2009. We've learned a lot. As people use the mod spec, they found it very, very challenging to read at times. And we had some variety of gurus in the OGC world looking through it over the past several years and recommending an update. The modular specification is critical because it underpins everything we do in OGC. And the first major change we made was to convert this to this sort of ambiguous document that was something between a spec and a policy into a formalized standard. So now compliance with the OGC modular specification will be compliance with that as a foundational standard, just like many of the ISO TC211 standards, general feature model, et cetera, underlie our own OGC standards. We build upon the mod spec as well. And the mod spec generally has one really important job. Any standard developed against the mod spec should be testable. You can't pass conformance with the mod spec without having a standard itself that can be tested. And so we actually have a validation step in the meta-norma publication pipeline where all of our standards are validated against requirements from the mod spec to ensure that everything in a new standard is just as testable as we demand it in the mod spec. So the mod spec is now a standard. It is part of our baseline. As we've had a lot of discussion on Resolution 684 this week. Well, here you go. More to talk to. We love modular standards as well. We like lots of parts in OGC. And so the mod spec has been broken into 3 parts. A core data model, then some requirements for how UML models are structured, and requirements for XML and schematron. So it's now a 3-part document with other parts perhaps forecast. We got much more clear about permissions and recommendations. They used to be sort of scattered amongst the text, and you had to learn how to read 10 paragraphs of very opaque text to find one little permission statement. We've pulled all those out and highlighted those, so it's much easier to read the mod spec. We've clarified and made for consistent use of the terms specification and standard. Here I'm talking about the mod spec, which itself is a standard. I know this gets really confusing. We do not want to have the 3 hours it would take to walk through all the different things about the difference between a spec and a standard, and we would all argue, and we probably wouldn't agree anyhow. So at least we have consistent terminology in OGC that we all want to follow. We have really dug into this topic in this latest update, and that is what we're referring to as a requirements module in the modular specification. So this is a collection of requirements or requirements classes that collectively do something of value and ideally can operate as an independent implementable piece of a standard. This is something in OGC we refer to as our building blocks. And if you look at our OGC APIs, they each comprise a whole series of smaller building blocks, and people are free to implement just the block they need to get something done. So we've always had that concept in the mod spec, but we didn't do a good job of formalizing it and structuring it and limiting it. And so that's what we've done in this change, is some of the limitations to ensure that there is a defined way in which you can assemble the requirements for your standard in such a way that you have these little reusable building blocks. And you're going to see these reflected a lot more in upcoming OGC publications. For instance, a new part of OGC API features is also going to be published as a part of OGC API Common. Same exact document, but the building blocks contained within that document work under both standards families. And so this concept of a requirements module, a collection of classes, and the building blocks is really, really important. And so you'll see we actually now in the mod spec describe that there is a relationship between such modules and these building blocks, and they purposefully built for reuse. And if you look at OGC's own definitions of our building blocks and what these really are, and this is actually out of our policies, is it's a package of functionality defined to meet business or domain needs. And then we've got some more sub-definitions. You can even make a building block out of other building blocks. And it is structured as one or more modules. We'll be updating this text in our policies to be requirements modules. But this is a really important update for us, and it's reflected in a lot of OGC standards, not just APIs, but also, for instance, in the new features and geometries, JSON, which will be emerging very soon, the sort of a superset of GeoJSON. GeoJSON itself could be a building block in there, as will a building block for coordinate reference systems, as will a building block for solid geometries, et cetera. So really important. Another one that all of our ISO TC 211 people love, we all love UML. So we have updated the UML model to ensure that our UML model for the modular specification is usable, reusable, and testable as we implement new standards that have UML dependencies. So for those of you who are interested and want to know more about the mod spec itself, here are the 3 parts. They are going to go to vote in OGC. I'm really hoping the week after next. We've had a pause in our voting while the U.S. government got back to work. Now that our folks in U.S. government are back at their desks, we'll open up all the voting that was sort of started in Boulder, and the mod spec is one of those. So all 3 parts are available here. There is a release notes document to help you understand changes between the old and new version. And the original source has now been converted over to GitHub, and I believe it's all in ASCII doc now, if you want to read the original source. And so with that, I want to thank you very much for your attention on the OGC specific stuff and the mod spec. Just remember, one last time, because I can't say it enough, we demand testability in the work we do. We want standards that are directly implementable. In order to do that, we have to have some basis, some foundation for that testability. And I know we've had discussions in TC 211 about might the mod spec have some value in the process here as well. And so we're certainly open to that conversation. It comes up about every other JAG meeting, and certainly happy to entertain that further. But with that, I'll stop now, and I'd like to move on to Alan Jameson, who I know is with you in person. Lucky Alan. Alan, I'm going to stop sharing.